The email arrived on a Wednesday afternoon while I was still running a low-grade fever. Subject line: Schedule adjustment notification. I almost deleted it, assuming it was another automated HR message about benefits or policy updates. But something made me open it. Effective upon your return, your position will transition from full-time to part-time status, 30 hours per week. This adjustment reflects current operational needs and budget constraints. Your benefits will be modified accordingly. Please contact HR with any questions. I read it 3 times, my fever-fogged brain trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I'd been out sick for 2 weeks with pneumonia. My doctor had cleared me to return the following Monday. And now, 5 days before my scheduled return, they were cutting my hours by 25%. No phone call. No meeting. Just an email sent to someone too sick to properly respond. I set my phone down carefully on my nightstand, next to the half-empty bottle of cough syrup and the stack of medical bills I'd been trying to organize. My chest felt tight, and not just from the lingering congestion. Then I remembered something important. I was the senior compliance officer at Hartwell Industries. I didn't just handle employee complaints. I audited HR practices. I ensured we followed federal and state employment law. I conducted the mandatory training on proper procedures for schedule changes, leave management, and retaliation prevention. And I'd been systematically documenting every compliance violation I'd noticed over the past 18 months. Not because I was planning anything, but because that's what compliance officers do. We document. They just made a very expensive mistake. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something. This isn't a story about getting revenge on a bad employer. It's about what happens when the person responsible for keeping a company legal gets treated like they're disposable. When the systems you built to protect employees get turned against you. And when the documentation you've been maintaining becomes the evidence of your own mistreatment. If you've ever been punished for being sick, for needing medical care, for being human enough to have a body that sometimes breaks down, stay with me. Because what they forgot was that I knew exactly which laws they were breaking. And I had proof. My name is Nicole Martinez, and until that email, I'd spent 5 years keeping Hartwell Industries out of legal trouble. I built their entire compliance program from scratch. When I was hired, they were facing 3 employment discrimination lawsuits and had failed their last DOL audit. Within 2 years, I'd implemented training programs, policy revisions, and reporting systems that transformed us into a model employer. Or so I thought. I'm detail-oriented to the point of obsession. My wife, Marissa, jokes that I probably have backup plans for my backup plans. She's not wrong. I keep meticulous records. I document everything. Not because I'm paranoid, but because in compliance work, documentation is literally your job. Every policy violation I observe goes into a secure file. Every complaint that's mishandled gets noted. Every time HR cuts corners or ignores procedures I've established, I track it. Not to weaponize later, but because if the Department of Labor or EOSC ever audits us, I need to show I was doing my job properly, even if others weren't. I'd accumulated 18 months of these observations. Instances where HR rushed terminations without proper documentation. Times when managers retaliated against employees who filed complaints. Situations where our VP of Operations, Derek Walsh, pressured HR to bend rules for his preferred employees while strictly enforcing them against others. And now they just added their biggest violation yet. Retaliatory reduction of hours for an employee on medical leave. I pulled my laptop onto my bed, ignoring the way the movement made me cough. I opened my secure compliance files and created a new folder, Personal Matter, Martinez Schedule Reduction. Then I started documenting everything systematically. First, I screenshotted the email and saved it with timestamp metadata. Then I pulled up our employee handbook, the one I'd written, and copied the relevant sections on schedule modifications. Any change to an employee's regular schedule must be communicated in writing at least 2 weeks in advance, with opportunity for discussion and documentation of business. Justification. They'd given me 5 days during medical leave, with no discussion. Next, I accessed our HR management system. My compliance officer credentials gave me read access to nearly everything. I pulled up my personnel file. Performance reviews. All exceeds expectations. Attendance record. Exemplary except for this current medical leave. Disciplinary history. None. Then I checked something else. Our budget reports. The email had cited budget constraints as justification. But I'd reviewed our quarterly financials just before getting sick. We were actually ahead of budget projections. We just posted our most profitable quarter in company history. The budget justification was fabricated. I kept digging. I accessed the schedule modification requests from the past year. 17 employees had been moved from full-time to part-time. I exported the data and started analyzing patterns. 12 of the 17 were women. 14 were over 40. 9 had taken medical leave in the 6 months prior to their reduction. All 9 of those had been classified as having chronic conditions in their leave paperwork. I was looking at a systematic pattern of targeting employees with health issues and reducing their hours to either force them out or cut benefit costs. And I had documentation of all of it. By the time Marissa got home from work that evening, I had built a preliminary case file that would make any employment attorney salivate. "You're supposed to be resting," she said, finding me surrounded by printouts and laptop screens. "They cut my hours," I said flatly. "Send me an email this afternoon, effective when I return on Monday." Her expression shifted from concern to fury. "While you're on medical leave? Isn't that exactly the kind of thing you're always telling other companies not to do?" "Yes, which makes this particularly stupid on their part. What are you going to do?" I looked at the evidence spread across our bed. "First, I'm going to finish documenting everything. Then I'm going to file an internal complaint through proper channels, which I know they'll mishandle. Then I'm going to file with the Department of Labor and the EOK. And then I'm going to watch our general counsel explain to our board of directors why we're facing a federal investigation led by our own compliance officer." Marissa sat down beside me carefully. "Are you sure you want to go to war with your employer while you're still recovering from pneumonia?" And they forgot that I'm the one who knows where all the bodies are buried. The next morning, despite still feeling weak and congested, I composed a formal internal complaint. I used the exact template I'd created for employees to report violations. I cited specific policy sections, included relevant documentation, and submitted it through our anonymous reporting system. The system routed all complaints to me, the ZN, compliance officer, for review and investigation. But I'd built in a fail-safe for situations where the compliance officer herself was the complainant. Those automatically went to our general counsel, Patricia Vance, and copied the CEO. I hit submit and watched the automated confirmation email arrive. Then, I started my timer. Our policy required acknowledgement of complaints within 24 hours and initial response within 72 hours. I spent the rest of Thursday resting and organizing my evidence. By Friday morning, I'd received no acknowledgement. The 24-hour deadline passed. I documented the violation. By Monday, my scheduled return date, I still hadn't heard anything. I was feeling better, about 80% recovered. I got dressed in my usual business casual attire and drove to the office. When I walked in, our receptionist, Dana, looked shocked. "Nicole, I didn't think you were coming in today. Why wouldn't I? I'm cleared to return." She glanced nervously toward the HR department. I thought with the schedule change I was never properly consulted about. I'm full-time until someone can explain to me in a formal meeting with documentation why that's changing. I walked to my office, a small space tucked near the legal department. Everything looked exactly as I'd left it 2 weeks ago, except for one thing. There was a moving box on my desk. I opened my office door to find Shauna from HR inside, packing up my personal items. What are you doing? I asked, my voice level despite my racing heart. Shauna jumped, nearly dropping the photo frame she was holding. Oh, Nicole, I didn't expect you. Why are you packing my office? I was told you were transitioning to part-time and would be moving to a shared workspace. By who? Derek sent an email on Friday saying to clear this office for the new hire starting next week. Derek Walsh, VP of Operations. The same Derek who'd been pressuring HR to cut costs by reducing headcount and benefits. The same Derek whose department I'd flagged multiple times for policy violations. Derek doesn't have authority over my workspace, I said. I report to Patricia in legal, not to operations. I'm just following instructions, Shauna said, looking miserable. Stop packing. Nothing in this office moves until I have a formal meeting about my status change with proper documentation and legal review. Shauna set down the frame and practically fled. I sat at my desk, opened my computer, and sent an email to Patricia Vance with Derek Walsh and our CEO, Martin Chen, copied. Patricia, I returned to work this morning as scheduled and found HR packing my office without authorization. I submitted a formal complaint on Thursday regarding my schedule reduction and received no response, violating our 72-hour policy. I'm requesting an immediate meeting to discuss both the substantive issue and the procedural violations. Please confirm meeting. Time by end of day. I hit send, then pulled up my compliance monitoring dashboard. Our company had 3 open investigations from external agencies. I was the point person on all of them. Funny how they needed me for those, but apparently didn't need me full-time anymore. 20 minutes later, Patricia called my direct line. Nicole, can you come to my office, please? Of course. Of course? Patricia's office was on the executive floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture. When I arrived, she was alone, which told me this was going to be an off-the-record conversation first. Sit, she said, closing the door. What the hell is going on? I slid a printed copy of my complaint across her desk, along with the schedule reduction email. Did you receive my formal complaint on Thursday? She scrolled through her email, frowning. I see it now. It went to my spam filter for some reason. Convenient. Her eyes narrowed. You think someone deliberately routed it to spam? I think our EAT department takes direction from Derek Walsh, and Derek Walsh has been trying to reduce headcount in every department that doesn't report directly to him, including compliance. Patricia read through my complaint, her expression growing darker with each paragraph. This is pretty damning, Nicole. It's documented fact. If you file externally with this, we're looking at a lengthy investigation, probably significant penalties. I know, I've conducted enough of these investigations myself. She set down the papers. What do you want? I want my full-time status restored immediately. I want a formal investigation into why this was done and who authorized it. I want documentation showing it won't happen again. And I want Derek Walsh investigated for retaliation and policy violations across multiple departments. That last one is a big ask. Then you'll have a bigger problem when I file with Dahl tomorrow, and they subpoena all the records that you've been maintaining as part of my... Patricia was quiet for a long moment. You've been documenting Derek's violations? I've been documenting everyone's violations. That's literally my job. Derek's just happened to be the most extensive. Show me. I pulled out my tablet and opened my secure files. I showed her the pattern of schedule reductions targeting employees with health issues. The complaints against Derek's managers that had been dismissed without proper investigation. The budget reports proving the cost justification was false. The documentation of 17 similar cases over 18 months. Patricia's face went pale. How long have you had this? I've been building the file for 18 months, but I wasn't planning to do anything with it unless there was an external audit. This was just me doing my job until they made it personal. Derek's going to fight this. Derek's going to lose. And if the company tries to protect him instead of addressing this properly, you'll lose too. Publicly. Expensively. Patricia stood up. Stay in your office. Don't talk to anyone. I need to brief Martin immediately. 2 hours later, I was called to a conference room. Martin Chen, our CEO, sat at the head of the table. Patricia was to his right. To his left, looking like he'd swallowed something bitter, was Derek Walsh. "Nicole, thank you for coming," Martin said, his voice carefully neutral. "We've reviewed your complaint and the supporting documentation Patricia shared. I have some concerns about how this situation has been handled." "As do I said. Derek leaned forward. "Look, there's clearly been a miscommunication. The schedule adjustment was based on projected budget needs for next quarter. It wasn't personal." I pulled out my tablet. "Your department is 12% under budget this quarter and projected to finish the year 8% under budget. Our overall company revenue is up 18%. Where exactly are these budget constraints you cited?" Derek's jaw tightened. "Those projections could change. Then the proper procedure would be to notify employees when budget constraints actually materialize, not to preemptively cut hours during someone's medical leave based on hypothetical future problems." Martin held up a hand. "Derek, let me ask you directly. Did you instruct HR to reduce Nicole's hours while she was on medical leave?" "I instructed HR to implement cost-saving measures across all departments. Nicole's schedule adjustment was part of that broader initiative." "Show me the list of other positions being reduced," I said. Derek hesitated. "That information is confidential. I'm the compliance officer. I have access to all personnel actions for review. If this was truly a broad initiative and not targeted retaliation, you can show me the full list right now." Martin turned to Derek. "Show her." Derek pulled out his phone reluctantly, typed something, and forwarded an email to me. I opened it on my tablet. There were 5 positions listed for reduction. Mine was the only one. The other 4 were vague to be determined based on performance reviews. "This isn't a broad initiative," I said. "This is targeted elimination of my position disguised as a cost-cutting measure." "That's not," Derek started. "Were any of these other positions actually reduced?" I interrupted. Silence. Derek Martin's voice was quiet but sharp. "Were any other positions actually reduced?" "We're still evaluating. That's a no," I said. "Which means this was specifically targeted at me." Which brings us to the obvious question. Why? Derek's face was red now. "You're overstepping your role. Compliance is supposed to support operations, not obstruct it with constant nitpicking about minor policy interpretations. Minor policy interpretations like, don't retaliate against employees on medical leave. Those interpretations? That's not what this was. Then explain the 17 other employees who had their hours reduced within 6 months of taking medical leave. Explain why 12 of them were women. Why 14 were over 40. Explain the pattern that, from a compliance perspective, looks exactly like systematic discrimination and retaliation." The room went dead silent. Martin turned to me. "You have documentation of 17 similar cases?" "Yes." "Detailed documentation." "I was compiling it for our annual compliance report. I hadn't flagged it as critical yet because I wanted to analyze whether it represented actual pattern discrimination or statistical coincidence. But now that I'm personally affected, the pattern is pretty clear." Patricia spoke up. "Martin, we need to address this immediately. If Nicole files externally with this documentation, we're looking at a class action situation." "She's bluffing," Derek said. "She's not going to torpedo her own employer." "Try me," I said calmly. "I've already drafted my doll complaint. It's sitting in my email drafts folder. One click, and it's filed. The only question is whether this company addresses the problem internally and voluntarily, or whether you wait for federal investigators to force you to." Martin closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked at Derek. "Step outside." "Patricia, stay." After Derek left, Martin turned to me. "Straight talk. What do you actually want here?" "Restoration of my full-time status effective immediately. Back pay for any hours I would have lost. A formal investigation into the pattern of schedule reductions and whether they constitute discrimination. And Derek removed from any oversight of HR decisions. If we do that, Derek will claim retaliation against him. Then, he should have thought of that before retaliating against me. And before creating a pattern that exposed this company to millions in liability." Patricia leaned in. "Nicole, We appreciate the work you've done here, but you have to understand the political reality. Derek has been here 15 years. He's close with several board members. Removing him from HR oversight is going to create internal conflict, and not removing him is going to create federal investigations. Choose your conflict. Martin drummed his fingers on the table. Give us 48 hours. I need to brief the board, and legal needs to review the full documentation. In the meantime, you're restored to full-time status immediately, and Derek is not to have any contact with you or HR regarding your position. Find it key. But I'm putting my dole complaint on a 72-hour hold. If I don't see meaningful action by Thursday end of day, I file Friday morning. After the meeting, I returned to my office. Shauna had removed the packing box. Everything was back in place, though slightly disorganized. My phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. "How's the first day back?" I smiled despite my exhaustion. "Interesting. Told you I knew where the bodies were buried." The next 48 hours were a masterclass in corporate crisis management. I was formally interviewed by our outside employment counsel. I provided copies of my documentation, carefully redacted to protect employee privacy while still showing fate pattern. I walked them through each case, explaining the timing, the justifications given, and the outcomes. On Wednesday afternoon, Derek Walsh was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The announcement went company-wide to ensure objectivity in an ongoing personnel matter. By Thursday morning, I was called to another meeting. This time, Martin was joined by two board members I recognized, Sandra Lopez and James McCarthy. "Nicole," Sandra began, "we've reviewed your documentation and the outside counsel's preliminary assessment. What you've uncovered represents serious potential liability for this company. I know. That's why I documented it. The board is authorizing a full third-party investigation into HR practices, particularly regarding schedule modifications and leave management. You'll be the primary liaison for that investigation." "Understood." James spoke up. "We're also implementing immediate remediation. All 17 employees who had hours reduced will be contacted about restoration and back pay. We're revising our policies on schedule changes to require legal review. And we're restructuring so that HR reports directly to legal and compliance rather than operations." That last part made me sit up. That's a significant organizational change. "It should have been the structure all along," Martin said. "Having HR report to operations created a conflict of interest." Derek was incentivized to cut costs, even if it meant cutting corners on legal compliance. "What happens to Derek? That's still under investigation," Sandra said. "But regardless of the outcome, he will no longer have any authority over HR, compliance, or personnel decisions. I want that in writing. You'll have it by end of day." After the meeting, I walked out of that conference room feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not quite vindication. Something more like clarity. I'd spent 5 years building compliance systems to protect this company. And when the company needed protecting from itself, those same systems had protected me too. Over the following weeks, the investigation expanded. It turned out my documentation had uncovered even more than I had realized. The pattern of schedule reductions was just the visible tip of a much larger problem. Derek's department had been systematically pressuring HR to bend rules, ignore complaints, and prioritize cost-cutting over legal compliance. 6 managers in Derek's chain of command were ultimately disciplined or terminated. 17 employees received restoration of hours and back pay. 3 who'd already left the company were offered settlements and formal apologies. Derek himself resigned before the investigation concluded, negotiating an exit package that included a non-disparagement clause. I wouldn't have agreed to that if I were making the decision, but I wasn't the CEO. The real victory came 3 months later. Our new HR structure was fully implemented, with HR reporting to Patricia's legal department. I was promoted to VP of Compliance and Ethics with a significant raise and expanded authority. And we'd implemented a new anonymous reporting system that couldn't be routed to spam folders by it. But the moment that mattered most to me happened about 4 months after my return from medical leave. A young employee named Narcus, from the finance department, scheduled a meeting with me. He looked nervous, clutching a folder. "I heard about what happened with your hours," he said, "and I wanted to talk to you about something similar." He told me his manager had been pressuring him to work off the clock, to not record overtime, to come in on weekends without pay. He had documentation. He'd been tracking everything. But he'd been afraid to report it because he didn't think anyone would believe him. "I believe you," I said. "And more importantly, we have systems now, well, actually, investigate this properly. Will they retaliate against me? Not if I have anything to say about it." And now I have a lot more to say about it. We filed his complaint that day. It was investigated thoroughly. His manager was terminated. Marcus kept his job and received back pay for all the uncompensated overtime. 6 months after my hours were cut, I was invited to speak at a regional HR conference about building effective compliance programs. Standing at that podium looking out at hundreds of HR professionals and compliance officers, I told a version of my story. Not program isn't whether it looks good on paper, I said. It's whether it protects employees even when protecting them is inconvenient. Even when it's expensive. Even when it means challenging powerful people within your organization. After my presentation, a line of people waited to speak with me. Most were compliance officers with their own stories of being pressured to look the other way, to prioritize business interests over employee protections, to be window dressing instead of watchdogs. One woman, probably in her 60s, approached with tears in her eyes. "I was forced out of my last company for doing exactly what you did, reporting violations that implicated senior leadership. They made my life hell until I resigned. Thank you for fair fighting. You fought too," I told her. "You just didn't have the documentation to back it up. That's not your failure. That's the system failing you." A year after the email that tried to cut my hours, I was having dinner with Marissa at our favorite restaurant, celebrating our anniversary. "Do you ever regret not just filing with Dahl immediately?" she asked. "You gave them a chance to make it right internally. They could have buried it." "They could have," I agreed. "But by going internal first, I gave them the opportunity to fix a systemic problem." 17 people got their hours restored. Multiple bad managers were removed. The entire HR structure was reformed. If I had just filed externally and gotten my own settlement, none of that broader change happens. So you're saying sometimes working within the system is more effective than burning it down? I'm saying I knew exactly how the system was supposed to work because I built it. And when it wasn't working, I used that knowledge to force them to actually follow their own rules. She raised her glass to knowing where the bodies are buried. I clinked my glass against hers, and knowing exactly what to do with that information. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. I know it's not the explosive confrontation some revenge narratives promise. It's a story about documentation, systems, and using institutional knowledge to force institutional change. The truth is, they tried to quietly eliminate my position while I was too sick to fight back. They forgot that I was the one person in the company who knew exactly how illegal that was, and who had proof of every corner they'd been cutting for 18 months. If you've ever been punished for being sick, for needing medical accommodation, for having the audacity to have health problems that inconvenience your employer, I want you to know something. Your value isn't determined by your ability to work through illness. And the protections that exist on paper are only as strong as your ability to document when they're violated. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe. Share your experiences in the comments, especially if you faced retaliation for taking medical leave or requesting accommodations. Your stories create the evidence of how widespread these problems are. They help others know they're not alone. Remember, sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't dramatic confrontation. It's simply being the person who knows exactly which laws are being broken, having proof, and refusing to let it slide just because it's inconvenient for people with power.